Welcome to a special preview of the all-new generation of the BMW X6. But you might already see it, this one is a very special piece because it is colored in so-called Vantablack. Well, about this special coloring here and also about the exterior of this new generation, please join us here on Autogefühl. Subscribe if you haven't done so far. And now let's go in full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go. Well, we already know the all-new BMW X5 in this generation, have already driven it. The X6, of course, the same platform, but it's somewhat different, comes with special unique features, for example, this new illuminated front grille. And this is actually allowed even in Europe. You might know that the illuminated Mercedes star, for example, is just allowed in the US, but because this is the light itself. Here is an indirect light, so it's just like a shadow in the grille, and therefore it's also allowed. Very interesting. Headlamps here come standard with LED, optional adaptive LED, and then the top spec here are the laser light, 500 meters of high beam range. If it's allowed in your market, that again is not allowed in the US as for the full range of the high beam. And then of course, the front itself, pretty strong, somewhat similar to the X5, yes, but a little bit sportier. Here also in the lower area, there are also different trims available. And then this color, you've just seen in the intro we've given you. And this is really very special. It looks like it would be two-dimensional. It looks like a void, so to say. It looks really unreal, especially, it looks the same way on camera than it looks like in reality. It looks like a Photoshop job. It's really interesting. And the color is called Vantablack. It has a special structure. I'm not allowed to touch it actually, but I could touch a different sample piece earlier, and it feels a little bit like like corals, or it feels like limestone, so to say. So it has a very rough surface, and that's also the reason it can absorb about 99.9% of the light. Usually it is used in aerospace, because you don't want some stray light from the sun and want to have a clear view on the stars. And this time is the first time it has been used here on the car. So a very interesting piece. So far, this cannot be used for everyone. So it's a one piece so far. But of course, I want to get the feedback from you if you find that very cool or not. The length is at 4.93 meters, 16'2" or 195 inches. That's a couple of centimeters longer than the predecessor generation, but the same length as the all-new generation of the X5. The special thing here about the X6 in general is, of course, this falling roof line. So it's, so to say, a X5 coupe. You have a little bit less headroom in the back seats, that's for sure. Other than that, you have this more, sporty line, also with the stronger shoulders here. But the thing is, today with this special Vantablack paint, you cannot really see the design lines that well. So yes, at another stage we'll also give you a real color you can also buy. Here it's very interesting, and that's also the reason why they haven't used this paint on cars yet. It totally dissolves the lines. Usually designers want to play with the lines, want to play with light and shadow. Here in this part you usually would have a light and shadow part, but since this paint is absorbing all the light, it again looks like a black hole. It looks unreal, like I said, a Photoshop job. And when you stand in front of it, it's really, it's almost disappearing in your eyes. It's really interesting. Then those 20-inch wheels. Usually the X6 comes with 19 to maximum of 22-inch. This one again 20-inch with a black design and also with semi-off-road tires. In this case, very interesting. Then following this line. Again, a little bit sleeker than the X5. It's somewhat similar also to the previous generation of the X6, at least here in the side profile. But again, most interesting piece, of course, today with this color. Yeah, I mean, here from when you have a little bit light here, we also had some intro shots where we moved, a torch alongside it. Then you can see something of it. But again, pretty unique. So would that be something for you? Of course, if you think about using it in rain and snow and getting mud, getting it dirty, the paint could sustain it. But, after a while, some of the layers would, dissolve a little bit, so it would get used, so to say. So it's not as persistent as a real metallic paint or something like that. Therefore, it's rather unrealistic that it will be used in everyday driving life, at least in the near future. It's always the same case when you are not allowed to do something, you want to do it even stronger. And I just want to touch this paint, but I'm not allowed to. Someone is watching, so yeah, but as I said, I touched the sample piece earlier, and it really feels, like a rough stone. Really interesting. So the all-new X6 here in this new generation, you see that the tail lamps, they are drawn horizontally with this interesting LED signature. So this is a major change if you compare it to the previous generation. This one looks even stronger on the road and a little bit more persistent in the whole design. And of course, with this special Vantablack color, it looks very interesting, especially from this angle. Really dark everywhere, absorbing all the light, and then you can see the red signature. This is a very impressive piece. Well, the lower end, those ones are pure fake exhaust tips here. The outer part, the real exhaust, is on the inside. And technology-wise, speaking of that, what's interesting, you can get the normal adaptive dampers, that's standard, and then optional with an air suspension. Also, this car is featuring an anti-tilt control you can get. Furthermore, an rear axle steering to make it a little bit more agile. Last but not least, in a special sports package, you can also get a rear differential lock. So exactly the same as you could also get for the X5. Most of the stuff is optional, but definitely the rear axle steering is something I would definitely get for a car of that size if it's available technology-wise, which it is in this case, makes the car just so much more agile. Weight-wise, it's not too much difference to the X5, so we can also expect similar driving features. And another straight perspective here, straight rear. This is also a very interesting perspective. And just looking from here, the material looks a little bit like microfiber, even looks like a fabric surface. Pretty interesting. Also has a special badge here with BMW X6 for Vantablack, also with a number plate. Again, a very special piece here. And again, I want to hear from you. Would you like to drive this one here? Appear pure badass on the road like that. Yeah, and what about the trunk, by the way? So one more clear shot for you. And I'll tell you something about the trunk here. The liter figure is 580 to 1,525 liters in the X6, whereas it would be 645 to 1,860 with the X5. So you lose 60, 70 liters in the standard setup, and then with folded seats, you lose about 250 liters. That's a disadvantage of the X6, of course. So this is something like a pre-production model, so one of the first hand-built pieces of the all-new generation X6. That's the reason also why we cannot get on the inside today, so the interior is basically sealed off. But one secret I can tell you so far is that the base paint of this one is actually a blue car, and they did that because I want to say, hey, we don't use the black paint underneath, so we really show that this additional paint layer on the top, that this one actually also works with a different color underneath. That's very interesting. And again, also this illuminated front grille, it still works while driving the car, and that, will look massive, I can tell you. So, and you've seen we lit it up here a little bit, so a little bit more light here for you to show you that even with more light on, this car remains still super, super black. So let's take another exterior round here. It's a little bit lighter. So actually with a little bit more light on, I personally find it even more spectacular. What about you? Also in this new generation, you can see that the headlamps, they are more horizontally drawn as well. This new design trend, of course. Again, the car looks even wider. It has become a little bit wider, a couple of centimeters, but also visually even wider than before. And now with more light, you can really see how this usual dropping line here at the height above the door handles, which would be the main design line for a designer, is disappearing. So now you can see a little bit that the top part is a little bit lighter than the lower part, but just a little slight nuance. The paint is even on the door handles itself. In the usual X6, by the way, you will have special two design lines. There's the M Sport, which would be, something like that, where the wheel arches are also painted in the vehicle color. And then there's also the X line, which would be a more chrome off-roadish line. They have then also accentuated wheel arches together with some more chrome elements. And again, this very impressive perspective, 3/4 from the rear, this shark fin antenna, and this small overlapping top wing, heated rear windscreen, and then this very small spoiler lip here in the rear. It wasn't even visible before. Now I can really see it with my own eyes that there is one actually. The reason is that those coupe-style building forms, they are never that good as for the drag, so they need to add some special wings to get a little bit more downforce then. Yeah, pretty interesting, pretty stylish, and maybe, if you think about some football players who paint their cars in like shiny golden stuff or something, maybe that would be a third-party job for them, because it will be very, very expensive. The paint which is applied here costs more than whole cars that are actually bought on the normal market. Wow, this illuminated front kidney is just spectacular, even when the hood is open. And what we can also see here, this is the living proof. It is a Thomas blue paint actually. You can see it here under the hood. So that's the proof that it really works with any color basically as a ground color. Pretty interesting. This Vantablack, by the way, could also be a Vanta white at some point, so it would also work in other color nuances on the top layer. So yeah, pretty interesting technology. This it works with the nano technology. Well, about the engines here in general, this is just an energy battery loading setup, by the way, so just for the studio setup. Doesn't look that clean at the moment. So this one here, the entry petrol engine, which would be a 40i 3-liter R6, 340 horsepower. And then there will be the M50i, the 4.4-liter V8, 462 horsepower. Just a little bit more than 4 seconds is the acceleration figure. No 50i, this one will be phased out because, when people go for the V8, they usually go for the strongest version, then directly the M50i. And then the 3-liter R6 diesel, 30D with 265 horsepower, or the M50D with 400 horsepower. And another difference here to the X5 is also that the X6 will not get the PHEV, so no plug-in hybrid version for the X6 so far. Yeah, pretty much a pity, I think. Mainly, they think that the M50i, the top V8, will be the most important engine for this, at least in the States. And in Germany, especially the M50D, also from a previous generation, was quite popular. And now to our conclusion for today. First look at the all-new BMW X6 in this new generation, and of course this special Vantablack paint. Well, first of all, in general about this vehicle, so it is pretty similar to the X5, that's a natural thing, but definitely if you compare it to the previous generation, it looks a little bit sleeker, a little bit more elegant. Of course, the X6 still has a very massive appearance. It is a little bit bigger than before, but just slightly. But the visual part of it has an even bigger stance on the road. But at the same time, it doesn't look that bulky, especially in the rear. So I think the previous generation looks a little bit bulkier if you compare it here now to the new version. I think that's definitely a good development. Of course, you will lose some headroom in the rear. That's clear. It has been the same with the previous generation. Also lose some space in the trunk. But still, it will be somewhat well usable. No doubt about that. If you want to know more about the interior, will be pretty similar to the one of the X5. You can check out those reviews here. We will link it in the video description and in those comments. And especially here, this illuminated front kidney is so impressive. So probably my favorite feature here with this new generation. Engine-wise, told you earlier, a little bit different that the normal 50i will be phased out. There will only be the M50i, then the really stronger one, and no PHEV here for the X6. So everything rather classic as for the engine lineup. But if you want it a little bit more economical, where you can get it on different markets, this 3-liter R6 diesel is a very efficient one. So that might be a good solution if you want a better fuel economy. Yeah, and about this paint, it is of course something like an experiment. So also BMW wants to hit your reactions for that. And Again, it looks like a void, it looks two-dimensional. That's also what this color usually does. Again, not really suitable for everyday driving use yet. Maybe at some stage, I don't know. Me personally, I always prefer a bright Thomas blue. We call it here on Autogefühl, but it's definitely interesting to see it, at some point. Pretty much like this. So of course here we will keep you updated with the all-new BMW X6 soon in different versions, and also while driving. So stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't done so far, and it has been a pleasure for me and also for Holger today here behind the camera to serve you with this special preview. See you next time.